Derek Cole had been elbow-deep in the guts of a battered steam turbine when the first hint of fate nudged him. A strange poster tacked to a telephone pole outside the auto shop, its edges curled by the wind, caught his eye. It showed the silhouette of a carnival, bright with swirling ribbons of starlight that curled around the painted figure of a mysterious woman. Bold, shimmering letters proclaimed, "The Celestial Carnival, wonders beyond imagining." It was at once gaudy and elegant, a mix of cosmic fancy and old-world showmanship. Derek found himself unable to look away. His best friend, Mia, stepped out of the office, noticing the curious tilt of his head. She followed his gaze and spotted the flapping poster. "You know, Derek," she ventured, brushing her short hair aside. "You've been cooped up in this place too long. Maybe it's time you saw something interesting for a change." Derek wiped the grease from his palm, nodding thoughtfully. He was a mechanic by trade and by love. The hush of an engine block, the whir of pistons, the smell of machine oil, all of it gave him comfort. Ever since his parents had passed, he had sought a certain solitude in dismantling and restoring engines that most had long given up on. But now, from across the street, that poster beckoned. It felt almost alive, as though it spoke to him in a language he only half understood. He shrugged, trying to keep his tone casual. "A carnival, Mia? Not sure that's my kind of thing. You know how I am about big crowds." She looked at him with that sisterly concern he both welcomed and dreaded. "Everybody needs a distraction now and again, Derek. Go out, breathe some fresh air that isn't laced with motor fumes, and see something wondrous. Who knows, maybe this carnival really does have something special." He sighed and nodded, more to appease her than to satisfy any real curiosity. That night, as the moon rose pale and ghostly above the quiet streets, Derek walked across the cracked pavement to where the carnival had set up on the outskirts of town. The grounds were lit by tall floodlights and swirling neon, the air alive with the music of calliopes and the distant laughter of children. A series of colorfully painted wagons formed a perimeter, each boasting arcane illusions, fortune-telling contraptions, or mechanical wonders that hissed with compressed steam. He purchased a ticket at a wooden booth festooned with shining orbs and polished brass gears. The booth attendant gave him a polite tip of the hat, smiling as if he recognized something in Derek that Derek did not see in himself. A mysterious hush fell around him as he walked deeper into the carnival. Beyond the standard amusements, ring tosses, puppet shows, whirling rides that spat out bright lights, stood the largest tent, circled by ropes and flickering lanterns. A sign above its entranceway declared, "Marvels from the Stars." That same stylized figure, the violet-hued woman, appeared in silhouette upon the sign. Derek felt his heart jolt. Something about the image felt as though it called to him. A subtle notion that there was something inside that tent he needed to see. It took only a moment before he stepped through the canvas flap and entered a hush so profound it felt like stepping into another world. Inside, rows of seats surrounded a circular stage. The lighting was subdued, casting dramatic shadows across the sawdust floor. Spectators clustered in small groups, murmuring in anticipation. Derek made his way to a seat near the front, where a plain wooden barrier separated audience from stage. Presently, the ringmaster arrived, striding through a gap in the curtains. He wore a dashing red coat adorned with gold filigree, a broad hat with a purple plume, and tall, polished boots. A dramatic hush spread across the tent as the ringmaster raised a crooked cane, pointing it toward the ceiling. His voice boomed like thunder rolling through distant hills. "Ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages, prepare yourselves for the greatest spectacle known to humankind. I am Victor Cross, your humble guide through the uncharted realms of wonder." A swirl of silver confetti rained from above as he twisted his cane through the air. Around Derek, the crowd let out gasps of glee, enthralled by the ringmaster's flair. "But tonight," Cross continued, lowering his cane with a theatrical flourish, "I bring you the pinnacle of my collection. A being from beyond our little sphere, a traveler through cosmic seas, blessed or cursed, with attributes we can scarcely comprehend. Behold, Sana of the Stars." The lights dimmed further, and from behind a curtain of shimmering gauze, Derek glimpsed a figure stepping forward. He could see slender arms, graceful movements, and then the full shape of her. A woman with skin that glowed the color of twilight violets, hair like strands of starlight, and eyes that seemed to reflect galaxies hidden within their gold-flecked depths. Her posture spoke of both pride and apprehension. She was led by two attendants dressed in black. They guided her into a tall glass enclosure at the tent's center. The ringmaster gave a tug at his coat lapel, then spread his arms wide. Yes, my friends, an alien, discovered in the far reaches of our system. A creature whose origins remain a tantalizing mystery. Her name is Sana, but fear not. She cannot harm you from behind those barriers. Observe her unusual skin, that shimmering hue that no earthly science can replicate. Derek narrowed his eyes, feeling a surge of discomfort. The spectacle unsettled him. She was indeed a marvel to behold, but as he watched her, he sensed something deeper, a silent plea hidden in the tilt of her head or in the flutter of her luminous eyes. She glanced his way, and it felt like a spark arced between them. Had she singled him out, or was that his imagination playing tricks? The show continued. The ringmaster drew the crowd's attention to her exotic qualities, pointing with that crooked cane. A hush settled. With a gesture, Cross activated some hidden mechanism that caused the glass to glow with a pale, swirling light. Sanaa winced, as though the energy penetrated her. A faint hum reverberated in the air, and Derek felt the hair on his arms stand on end. You see, Cross said with a triumphant grin. The very air inside that enclosure is different, just enough to keep our lovely guest in a docile state. She requires it to breathe, or so our tests have shown. And thus, she remains in place, relying on us for her survival. Derek pressed his fists against his thighs, feeling a growing anger. Across the crowd, a smattering of applause erupted, though it was less than enthusiastic. This was no grand spectacle to him, it was cruelty. Yet, others seemed enamored, as though witnessing the greatest wonder of the age. Soon, the performance concluded, and the ringmaster swept his hat low, leading Sanaa back behind the curtains with the help of the attendants. The lights returned, and the crowd began to disperse, voices alive with chatter. Derek sat unmoving until nearly everyone had gone. He stared at the spot where Sanaa had stood, wrestling with the inexplicable sense that he'd just witnessed a grievous wrong. When he emerged into the carnival grounds, a soft breeze carried the scent of caramel apples and spun sugar, but the warmth of carnival delight no longer reached him. He walked, lost in thought, until he almost collided with Mia. She had arrived midway through, eager to see if Derek might be enjoying himself. She read his expression. "You look like you saw a ghost," she teased, but then her smile faded. "Derek, are you all right?" He shook his head. I don't know, Mia. There's something not right about the exhibit in that big tent. A woman, an alien. She's caged in there like she's some kind of sideshow. It doesn't sit well with me." Mia's eyes lit with curiosity. "An alien? Are you sure it's not just a fancy costume, or some high-tech suit?" He recalled the look in Sanaa's eyes, the haunting reality of her presence. "I'm sure," he said quietly, "and I don't think she's there by choice." They talked for a while as they walked the carnival perimeter, past the painted wagons and crates. Eventually, Mia touched his arm. "Well, what are you going to do about it?" She was always direct, always pushing him to face what made him uneasy. "I'm not sure yet," Derek admitted. Then he sighed, shoulders sagging beneath the weight of an emerging sense of responsibility. "But I can't just walk away from it." That night, Derek found no sleep, haunted by visions of Sanaa's face. He could almost sense her telepathically, though he wasn't certain if it was mere imagination. In the darkest hour, he rose from bed, threw on a jacket, and drove back to the carnival grounds. The place was shuttered for the evening, silent except for the rustle of tarps in the night wind and the distant rummage of a night watchman making his rounds. Derek found a spot behind a parked freight trailer, from which he had a limited but strategic view of the main tent. Eerie shapes loomed in the gloom, rides half disassembled, wagons locked tight, a few board guards leaning against fences. In the center, the big tent looked almost lifeless, its lights out. Yet Derek could not leave. Something compelled him to stay, as though an invisible chain bound him to this place. He waited. Minutes bled into hours. Then, just as he was about to accept that no revelation would come, the tent's rear entrance opened. Two guards, the same ones from the earlier performance, stepped out. Between them, escorted quietly, was Sanaa. She wore a thin cloak over her shoulders, but Derek could see the sheen of her violet skin in the moonlight. They walked around the side of the tent and paused near a utility door, where an enormous mechanical contraption was partially exposed. Derek could make out its labyrinth of wires, tubes, and readouts. One guard tapped at a control panel, and the contraption hissed, spitting out clouds of vapor. Sanaa stumbled, pressing a hand to her chest. "That's right," one guard said in a low grunt. "Don't give us any trouble. We've got our orders. We'd prefer not to, but we'll use this if we have to." He patted a device at his belt that glowed faintly. Sanaa lifted her head, those gold-flecked eyes reflecting a sorrowful resignation. A wave of empathy crashed over Derek, almost like an echo in his own mind. "Help me," the feeling seemed to say, though no words were spoken aloud. The second guard shrugged. "Just do what the boss says, alien. It'll be easier on you." They ushered her through the door, and it closed behind them with a heavy clang. Derek let out a trembling breath. That telepathic echo was more than a fancy hunch. She truly was calling out for help. He lingered until the guards re-emerged, this time without Sanaa. They moved off into the darkness, presumably to patrol or rest. Derek made his approach, creeping along the wagons and crates with cautious steps. His heart pounded as he reached the utility door. Locked. But Derek was a mechanic, adept at picking locks as often as he had to fix them. With the right tool from his pocket, he could handle basic mechanical tumblers. He set to work, mindful of the time, the hush, the slightest footstep that might give him away. The lock clicked. He slipped inside. A narrow corridor led him deeper into the backstage labyrinth of the carnival. Faint overhead lights flickered, accompanied by the hum of arcane machinery, possibly used for illusions and mechanical wonders. At an intersection, he heard voices from the left. With a quick pivot, he took the right corridor, creeping as quietly as possible. After a short distance, he saw an aperture leading into a larger chamber. From that room's gloom, a soft glow emanated, pulsing faintly. He risked a glance inside. He saw tall glass walls that formed a rectangular cell, reminiscent of an aquarium, except this was no place for fish. Sanaa stood within, her head bowed, posture weary. Strange tubes ran from the ceiling to the top of the enclosure, swirling with luminescent gas. The apparatus hissed and bubbled, feeding the atmosphere Sanaa needed to survive, or so the ringmaster claimed. From behind a console, Derek spotted a flicker of movement. Then Ringmaster Victor Cross himself stepped into view, his back to Derek. "Subject remains stable," Cross said, speaking into a small recorder. "Though mental agitation appears heightened when separated from her usual environment. We must proceed with caution. Her telepathic reach may extend beyond the glass. I sense it even now, like a faint whisper, urging me to let her go." He gave a bitter laugh. "Pity for her, I have no intention of doing so." Sanaa's eyes flicked up, focusing for a moment on Derek's silhouette. She made no sudden movement, but Derek felt another wave of thought. Caution. Danger. He waited, heart hammering, as Cross pressed buttons on the console. The swirling gas in the tubes changed color from pale lilac to a deeper, more ominous purple. Sanaa pressed her hands to the glass, wincing as though the shift in atmospheric composition caused her distress. Cross studied the readouts on a monitor, his expression clinical, as if analyzing an insect. Then, footsteps approached from behind Derek, and he realized with a jolt that a guard or attendant must be drawing near. With no time to retreat, Derek scrambled to hide behind a large stack of crates by the chamber's entrance. He held his breath as the footsteps grew louder. Another figure entered the room, this one in a crisp black suit, with an air of official authority. "Mr. Cross," the newcomer said, the tone clipped. "The next demonstration is scheduled for tomorrow night, correct? Our investors expect to see results." Cross gave a curt nod. "They shall have results, Mr. Argyle. Once they witness the extraordinary properties of her biology, the offers will pour in. Governments, private collectors, you name it. No one can resist the marvel of living alien tissue. This carnival might be small now, but soon it shall span continents, perhaps even travel off-world, should the technology allow." Sanaa turned her head away, as if refusing to meet Cross's gaze. Derek's anger frothed in his chest, but he remained frozen. Any misstep now could mean capture, or worse. "Just be certain your little science experiments do not kill her," Argyle said with a grunt. Our interest lies in a live specimen. A dead creature is worth far less. Cross let out a thin, humorless laugh. I assure you, we've performed enough tests to keep her alive for quite some time. She relies on that gaseous compound we synthesize, but it also keeps her somewhat sedated, manageable. I have no intention of losing my star attraction. With that, Argyle nodded and departed. Cross lingered a moment at the console, observing Sanaa's condition, before he, too, left, turning off the overhead light. Only the glow of the tubes remained, casting flickering shadows across the floors. Derek exhaled shakily, stepping out from the crates. Sanaa's gaze locked on him, apprehensive yet hopeful. He approached the glass enclosure, searching for some latch or control panel that might open it. A small keypad hung off to one side, presumably locked down by a code. This was beyond the simple mechanical locks he could pick. The Carnival ringmaster had clearly invested in better security for the alien than for the back door. He placed his hand against the glass, and Sanaa did likewise from her side. She tilted her head, and he felt a gentle intrusion in his thoughts, soft, wordless, but full of clarity. Images of her crashing spaceship, a sense of cosmic wonder, and an ache of loneliness. Then, a vision of the keypad on the wall, or something like it. She was showing him how to manipulate it, or at least the sequence that might release her. But it felt incomplete, as if part of her memory had been forcibly suppressed. Before he could learn more, a clang sounded in the corridor, guards returning. Panic surged in Derek's veins. With no time to free her properly, he whispered against the glass, "I'll come back. I promise." Her luminous eyes flickered with an emotion he could only describe as desperate faith. Then he darted away, slipping out the door he'd come through moments before. By some stroke of luck, he avoided detection in the labyrinth of carnival passages, emerging at last into the night. Sweat stung his eyes as he hurried back to his car. Mia was waiting in his living room when he entered his modest home. She stood quickly, worry etched across her face. "I knew you'd go back there, so I let myself in." She studied him. "Derek, what did you find?" He sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. "They're experimenting on her, Mia. They're planning to parade her around the world, selling tickets to see the alien freak, maybe even selling off her biology to the highest bidder. She's in pain." Her eyes shone with sympathy. "Did you talk to her? How do you know for sure?" "It's telepathy, I guess," Derek murmured. "I could feel her. She was giving me images, feelings. She wants out, and I can't blame her. This is so much bigger than me, Mia." She knelt beside him. "Derek, you might be the only chance she has." He pinched the bridge of his nose, exhaustion and determination warring in his mind. "I promised I'd come back, figure out how to open that cage. But they've got a keypad, and who knows what the code is. She can't remember everything. She's too sedated, or maybe they scrambled her mind with those machines." Mia's lips pressed together. "Maybe we can get help. People need to know." "Help from who? The authorities? They'd just seize her, lock her away in some government lab. I can't do that to her. She deserves freedom, not just another cage." In that moment, Derek realized what he had to do. A plan, reckless and half-formed, but the only plan he could bear. He would gather the tools, the know-how, and break Sanaa out before Cross's demonstration the following night. He began collecting items from his workshop, small wrenches, a hacking device he'd once used to bypass custom ignition modules, even a portable cutter that could slice through metal if needed. Mia stayed by his side, offering suggestions, ensuring he didn't overlook anything crucial. They hardly slept, forging a blueprint for infiltration under the cover of night. The following evening, the carnival was more crowded than before. The Celestial Carnival had grown in renown. People thronged in lines, hoping to see a real alien. Derek slipped past them, his bag of tools slung over his shoulder, head bowed to avoid attracting attention. Mia waited in the car, engine running, prepared to make a speedy getaway if they succeeded. Entering through a side passage, Derek navigated the labyrinth with the new knowledge gleaned from the night before. He peered around corners, narrowly avoiding guards. Soon, he arrived at that same chamber, finding it heavily patrolled now. The demonstration was likely imminent, meaning Sanaa would be moved to the main tent soon. He needed to act quickly, but an unexpected complication arose. The keypad by Sanaa's enclosure had been replaced with a more advanced security panel. Twisting steel bars anchored the glass. Additional tubes of swirling gas hissed from overhead. Derek's chest tightened. They had reinforced the cage, likely suspecting that prying eyes had grown bolder. He could only imagine Cross's face if he discovered Derek's infiltration. Sanaa saw him, her expression lighting up with hope, but it soon fell when she, too, noticed the new measures. She placed her hand on the inside of the glass, tapping lightly, as though to say, "Do not give up." He rummaged in his bag, pulling out the hacking device. The new panel might be advanced, but the Carnival's resources were still limited. Perhaps he could break through the code with enough time. He attached a small cable to the panel, then connected it to the device. A digital readout came to life, scanning for vulnerabilities. The bars were mechanical, though, requiring additional force or a code once the panel was disengaged. Minutes ticked by, with Derek's heart pounding. The device spat out lines of data. He wiped sweat from his brow, focusing on the flickering readout. Then, footsteps echoed. Not just one person this time, several. A group was approaching, their voices resonant. Cross and his entourage, or perhaps the demonstration audience. Derek's window of time was evaporating. Suddenly, the hacking device beeped. The panel's lock clicked, blinking green. He let out a breath of relief, yanked the device free, and pressed the release. There was a metallic clang, and the bars retracted, freeing the exterior of the glass. However, the hiss of the gas continued. The cage itself remained sealed. Derek swore under his breath. Sanaa pressed a switch from inside, one Derek had not noticed before. Her violet fingers danced across a hidden console, as though she recalled at last how to deactivate the interior mechanism. The swirling vapor drained away, replaced by normal air. Another beep, and the glass cracked open by a fraction of an inch, giving her just enough room to squeeze out. Derek held out his hand, heart fluttering with adrenaline. She slipped through the narrow gap, stumbling slightly, the sedation still in her system. Her skin felt unexpectedly warm against his hand, tingling with an otherworldly current. For a moment, their eyes met, and he felt a surge of understanding, a rush of gratitude, and a potent sense of connection unlike anything he'd known. They fled the room, moving swiftly down the corridor. Alarms began to blare, echoing across the enclosed space. Derek led her through the passages, guided by memory and an acute sense of urgency. He prayed they would find a back exit before any guards intercepted them. But fortune did not favor them for long. Rounding a corner, they came face to face with 3 guards brandishing shock batons. Derek jerked backward, shielding Sanaa behind him. "Don't do this," he warned, though he knew he was outmatched. He fished for a tool in his bag. One guard smirked. "Boss said shoot if we have to." They advanced. Sanaa, still woozy, pressed a trembling hand to Derek's shoulder. Then, in a sudden, jarring moment, a wave of invisible pressure radiated from her body, rolling through the corridor. The guards staggered, eyes wide, as if their minds were overwhelmed. 2 collapsed. The third managed to stay upright, though he trembled, baton clattering to the floor. Derek, too, felt the edges of her psychic shock wave, a rush of cosmic power that made him gasp, but it did not harm him. Sanaa locked eyes with him, and Derek realized she had shielded him, focusing the brunt of that telepathic force on those who meant harm. They dashed past the guards, turning left at a T-junction. At the end of the corridor, Derek recognized an exit sign. They burst through an old wooden door into the cool night air, emerging behind a large storage tent. Searchlights swept the carnival grounds now, and the mechanical rides fell silent, their operators diverting power to the alarm system. The entire carnival had shifted to crisis mode. "There!" a shout rang out. A pair of guards near a wagon spotted them, leveling firearms. Derek grabbed Sanaa's hand and sprinted in the opposite direction, weaving between crates and supply vehicles. Adrenaline thundered in his veins, each breath feeling as though it might be his last if they failed. A shot whizzed past, slamming into a crate with a splintering crash. Sanaa stumbled, and Derek scooped her up, practically carrying her around the side of a rusting trailer. Another bullet smashed a lantern overhead, raining sparks. He led her further into the labyrinth, trusting only that he might confuse their pursuers long enough. At last, he spotted the main entrance, now barricaded by carnival trucks. Mia must have parked near the perimeter. If only they could get beyond the cordon, they might reach the car. He tried to head that way, but the guards were closing in, organizing themselves into search teams. They'd be pinned if they attempted a straight run. Sanaa murmured something in her alien tongue, pointing to a small cluster of mechanical rides where the throng of onlookers had fled. She gestured again, as if urging him to trust her. He gave a quick nod, following her lead. They ducked into the maze of steel frameworks, past a silent carousel with carved creatures frozen in mid-prance. One guard nearly spotted them, shining a flashlight inches away. Derek stifled his breath. Sanaa locked eyes with him, transmitting calm. The guard moved on. Creeping behind the carousel, they heard a voice call out from a tower above them. It was Victor Cross himself, brandishing a bullhorn. People of the carnival, remain calm. Our alien exhibit has escaped its enclosure. She is dangerous and extremely unpredictable. Guards, find them at once. We cannot let that creature loose upon the world. Derek scowled at Cross's lies, at the callous disregard in labeling Sanaa a creature. She was not savage or monstrous. She had proven as much when she shielded him from that psychic wave. The ringmaster's words stoked the crowd's fear, though. Innocent bystanders stepped away, hands covering mouths, as if expecting an otherworldly terror to pounce at any moment. It took nearly 10 more minutes of stealth, inch by inch, but eventually Derek and Sanaa found a gap in the perimeter, an opening in the fence where a supply truck had left earlier, leaving a space wide enough to slip through. Beyond it, half a block away, Mia's car idled in a gravel lot. They rushed across the open expanse. Shouts erupted behind them, flashlights bouncing along the carnival fence. Derek's lungs burned. Sanaa's breathing came in ragged bursts. But they pushed forward, hearts pounding. The car's headlights flashed once, a silent signal from Mia, who flung open the passenger door. Derek practically launched Sanaa into the back seat before diving in himself. "Go, Mia, go!" he shouted, bracing himself. She didn't hesitate, tires screeching as they sped away from the carnival grounds into the darkness of the highway. Shouts, sirens, searchlights receded behind them, replaced by the hum of the car engine. Derek dared a backward glance, seeing Sanaa slump against the seat, eyes fluttering with exhaustion. Guilt tugged at him. He had rescued her, but at what cost? She was free of the carnival cage, yet they were fugitives now, hounded by Cross's men and who knew who else. Government authorities? Mysterious investors? Possibly all of the above. They drove for hours, forging deeper into a remote stretch of farmland and rolling hills. Only when they had put sufficient distance between themselves and the carnival did Mia dare to pull off the road, navigating a bumpy dirt path to an abandoned barn half hidden by tall grass. They parked inside and killed the engine. Derek and Mia exchanged looks, relief flooding them both, though anxiety still coiled in their guts. Sanaa remained in the back seat, gazing through the window at the moonlit countryside. Gently, Derek approached her, kneeling so he could see her face. "You're safe now," he whispered, uncertain if she'd understand his language without telepathy. "No more cages." She turned to him, raising one hand to his cheek. A swirl of warmth and light passed between them, accompanied by fleeting images he couldn't fully decode. A starship adrift among the stars, lonely nights behind glass, the ache of a world lost. Her golden eyes glistened, and though no words were spoken, Derek felt a profound gratitude that nearly brought tears to his own eyes. Mia joined them, biting her lip. "We need a plan. They'll be looking everywhere for us." Derek nodded. "First, we get some rest. Then, I don't know, Mia. We can't just drive around forever." They helped Sanaa into the barn's loft, where old hay bales had disintegrated into a soft bed of dust and straw. She lay down, visibly drained. Derek watched her with worry. Was she already suffering from a lack of the specialized atmosphere Cross had forced upon her? Or was she simply exhausted from sedation and the psychic exertion? Through the night's hush, Derek and Mia kept a silent vigil. Just before dawn, Sanaa stirred. She managed to stand, leaning on a wooden beam for balance. Derek offered his arm, guiding her outside so she could breathe the fresh air beneath a sky streaked with sunrise. She inhaled slowly, her posture lifting. He recognized the difference in her eyes, like she was finally tasting freedom. Over the coming days, they formulated a plan. Mia returned to town for supplies, carefully avoiding detection. Derek searched for any sign that Sanaa required a special atmosphere to survive. Oddly, she seemed to adapt quickly, her color returning to a more vibrant shade of violet with each passing hour. She communicated with Derek in bursts of psychic imagery, teaching him fragments of her language, which hummed with a melodic resonance. He learned that her ship had crashed months ago, far from the carnival grounds. Cross's men had found her battered and unconscious, whisked her away, and exploited her to draw crowds. She recalled glimpses of a hidden file, Cross's records of her physiology, rumored sale prices, hush money from clandestine organizations salivating at the chance to study a genuine extraterrestrial. Mia worried daily that a raid would come. She insisted they move often, never staying in one abandoned location for too long. Sanaa showed them places on a map she'd gleaned from Cross's system. Potential spots where her ship's components might remain, or where signals from her craft's beacon had once resonated. She needed them. Without the main drive from that wreck, there was little chance of restoring contact with her home, wherever that might be. Thus began a nomadic journey through the back roads of farmland and forest. At each stop, Derek tinkered with any advanced technology Sanaa remembered from Cross's logs, attempting to reconstruct a transmitter. But the device required a rare crystal or power source that none of them understood. Sanaa tried to explain in halting telepathy, referencing star charts and quantum signatures, but the concepts were nearly beyond Derek's technical grasp. Occasionally, they caught rumors of the carnival's pursuit. The name Victor Cross surfaced in local papers, along with stories about the escaped alien and her accomplices. Some articles treated Derek and Mia like dangerous criminals. Others, sensational tabloids, suggested the entire event was a hoax. Meanwhile, shadowy black cars roamed highways, full of men in dark suits who asked odd questions at gas stations. Despite the pressure, a fragile sense of camaraderie formed between Derek and Sanaa. Late nights found them sitting under the stars, a blanket spread over the grass. She would rest her head against his shoulder, gazing up at a sky that reminded her of home. Even in silence, he felt the warmth of her presence, that cosmic thread connecting them across species and worlds. One twilight, they found themselves encamped beside a wide lake. Fireflies danced along the shore. Mia had gone into the nearest town for fuel. Sanaa stepped to the water's edge, toes dipping in, looking at her reflection with a distant sadness. Derek approached, his heart twisting at the sight of her longing. "Will you try to return to your home world?" he asked gently. "Or do you think you might stay here, once you're truly free?" She glanced up at him, a small smile curving her lips. The psychic echo of her response drifted softly into his mind. "My people, they are far. The choice is uncertain. But you have shown me kindness, so perhaps I could remain, if I cannot go back." Her eyes shimmered, filled with starlight. Derek found himself fighting the swirl of emotions that threatened to overwhelm him. "I'd like that," he whispered. Night deepened, and with it, the unseen net of pursuit seemed to draw ever tighter. The next day, they discovered an article suggesting that Cross had aligned with certain government agents, persuading them that Sanaa posed a national security threat. Bounties were rumored to be posted, fueling opportunistic hunters to keep a watch for any trace of an exotic violet-skinned woman. Mia returned from a scouting trip, breathless. "Derek, they're setting up checkpoints. We can't keep wandering like this. We need to make a stand or find a real refuge." So they hatched their boldest scheme yet: locate the wreck of Sanaa's ship, salvage enough technology to either contact her people or at least secure a safe hideout. Sanaa believed her ship's remains might be hidden near a canyon several hours to the north, a remote region with a labyrinth of caves. Cross had never fully recovered the largest fragments, presumably because of the terrain's treacherous nature. They set out at dawn, cramming gear into the trunk. Sanaa, her senses sharpened, guided them with intuitive pulses, pointing out roads less traveled. The landscape shifted from farmland to rocky hills, then to craggy cliffs and steep ravines. Wind whipped across the desert plain. Here, no carnival lights would overshadow them. No crowds lurked to gape or betray. Near midday, they arrived at the canyon's rim, peering down into a winding gorge peppered with jagged stone spires. Mia parked the car behind a cluster of boulders. Derek, shading his eyes from the glaring sun, spotted a glint of metal deep below. It looked suspiciously like a chunk of starship hull. Sanaa nodded, confirming silently. This was indeed the place. Gingerly, they made the steep trek down, following a narrow path along the canyon wall. Loose rocks skittered underfoot. The temperature rose, but Sanaa's steps grew livelier as though the closer they came, the more her spirit soared. Finally, they reached a broad shelf of rock. There, half buried by rubble, lay a large section of curved metal, scorched and battered. A faint aura of otherworldly craftsmanship clung to its edges, as if it had once glowed with starlight. Sanaa traced her fingertips along strange markings etched into the hull. Her eyes glistened. Derek got to work, prying away debris, rummaging inside the hollow piece. Mia stood guard, scanning the canyon for signs of pursuit. Within minutes, they uncovered more of the interior, shattered consoles, twisted struts, and, most importantly, a small cylindrical device. Sanaa showed them how to detach it from the wreck, using a combination of mechanical skill and telepathic prompting. Once free, the device hummed gently, as though awakening. Sanaa's expression grew intense. She reached out mentally to Derek, filling his mind with explanation. This is the ship's core beacon. If we can power it fully, it may call for help or cloak us from detection. My people's technology can create illusions, hide us from pursuers. Excitement flickered in Derek's chest. A chance to protect Sanaa, to keep her safe from Cross. But then a voice rang out, echoing across the canyon walls, sending his heart plunging into fear. There they are. They whirled around. A squad of men, wearing the insignia of a private security force, advanced along the rocky ledge. At their head stood none other than Victor Cross, his red ringmaster coat replaced by a dusty leather duster, but his smug expression intact. Well, Cross sneered, adjusting his gloves. What a fortuitous discovery. You led me straight to the remains of her starship, which you so kindly unearthed. I suppose I should thank you, Derek Cole. Guards pointed rifles at Derek, Mia, and Sanaa. Mia clenched her jaw, fists tight at her sides. Derek stepped protectively in front of Sanaa. The canyon wind roared, swirling grit around them. It's over, Cross, Derek growled. She's free now. You can't just haul her back to your cage. Over, Cross echoed, arching an eyebrow. Not even close. I've struck deals with certain, resourceful individuals. They want her, whether for spectacle or study, I don't much care. I'll be paid handsomely once she's in my custody again. The only question is whether you and your friend leave here alive. One guard cocked his rifle. Sanaa trembled, but her eyes blazed with defiance. The cylinder in her hands pulsed, feeding power into her body, or so it seemed. Derek felt a psychic hum coursing through his veins, a link between them and the half-buried starship. Then, in a burst of swirling air, Sanaa unleashed a wave of telekinetic force. The guard staggered, battered by invisible currents. Cross was nearly knocked off his feet but clutched a rock outcropping at the last moment. Derek shielded Mia, though the wave didn't harm them. Rocks tumbled, echoing through the canyon. Dust rose in thick clouds. Sanaa gasped, clearly pushing herself to the limit. Cross, regaining composure, barked an order, and his men opened fire. Projectiles pinged against the starship hull, ricocheting dangerously. Derek dove down, pulling Sanaa with him behind a jagged wedge of metal. Mia slid behind a boulder, returning fire with a small pistol she'd stashed in her boot, though it was scarcely enough to deter them. Look out! Derek yelled, seeing Cross toss some sort of concussive device. It landed behind the hull fragment, rolling perilously close. Derek grabbed Sanaa, covering her with his body. The explosion rocked the canyon, sending a spray of gravel. Sanaa let out a cry, raising her hands. Her eyes glowed fiercely, an ethereal brilliance flooding outward. The concussive blast met an opposing force, her telekinesis, neutralizing most of the explosion's destructive power. Still, the shockwave knocked everyone sprawling. As the dust cleared, Derek glimpsed Cross's men regrouping, though some lay dazed. The ringmaster staggered to his feet, cursing under his breath, face twisted in rage. A shimmering aura surrounded Sanaa now, emanating from the cylinder they'd salvaged. Derek sensed possibilities swirling in his mind, images of advanced illusions that could mask them from sight. We must activate the cloak, Sanaa's mental voice insisted, pressed into Derek's consciousness. But it requires a short time to charge. Keep them at bay. Derek turned to Mia. Hold them off for just a moment, any way you can. She nodded, swallowing hard, and popped out from behind the cover, firing quick shots, forcing Cross's men to take cover behind large stones. Derek helped Sanaa secure the cylinder to a battered console in the hull. Sparks flew. Strange glyphs lit up, as though the broken starship momentarily awakened from a long slumber. Come on, come on, Derek muttered, eyes flicking between the console and their attackers. The cylinder's hum intensified, and from one of the ship's inner compartments came a flickering holographic interface. Sanaa touched it with delicate fingers, eyes ablaze. Cross, sensing something amiss, roared to his men. Now, while they're distracted, a surge of bullets and energy blasts battered the hull. Derek crouched low, clenching his teeth. The starship console beeped, and then a shimmering field expanded around the wreckage, enveloping Derek, Sanaa, and Mia in a luminous haze. Outside, Cross's men fired blindly, but to them, the image must have seemed as if their targets vanished amid swirling dust. Inside the field, Derek's jaw dropped. The world outside took on a ghostly, refracted quality, as though they peered through curved mirrors. Mia slipped in, panting. They can't see us? Sanaa gave a weary nod. The cloak is incomplete. It won't hold long. We must escape. They had to flee the canyon, but Cross's men were stationed at the only exit path. Another pulse of energy from the console gave Derek a wild idea. If they tapped further into the ship's partially functional systems, might they harness enough telekinetic force to move the wreckage, or them, somewhere else? Sanaa sensed his thought and responded with an uncertain expression. It would be risky. Meanwhile, gunfire still rained on the field, causing flickers of strain in the shimmering walls. Derek pulled Mia close, placing a hand on Sanaa's arm. We do this together, he said, heart pounding. Sanaa closed her eyes, channeling her power through the starship's surviving networks. Derek felt a roar in his mind, a sense of cosmic potential. Then the entire chunk of hull, along with the shimmering cloak, lurched upward, as though lifted by invisible hands. Outside the illusions, Cross and his men must have seen only swirling dust and a faint ripple in the air. The battered hull groaned, scraping against rocks, ascending a few feet, then 10, then drifting over the canyon floor at a snail's pace. Mia let out a breathless laugh. We're floating. Derek braced against the hull, trying not to look down. Sanaa's expression tightened. She was pushing her abilities and the limited power supply to the brink. The field wavered. More bullets ricocheted. Then, with a final surge of mental command, Sanaa propelled them over a rocky ridge. At the top, they dipped abruptly, crashing onto a slope hidden from the vantage of Cross's men. The cloak fizzled out, revealing them again. The hull clanged, rolling to a halt. Derek stumbled free, helping Sanaa stand. Mia clambered out, checking for injuries. In the distance, shouts indicated Cross's men were scrambling to track them. But for the moment, they had a lead. Scrapes and bruises stung Derek's body, but he forced himself to keep moving. They found another path that led back up the canyon side, winding away from Cross's vantage point. Sanaa managed to lug the cylinder, though her strength was almost spent. The three fugitives pressed on until they reached a plateau, where they found a neglected service road that led away into the desert beyond. As the sun began to set, painting the rocks in shades of gold and crimson, they paused for rest. Derek gazed at Sanaa, whose shoulders sagged with fatigue. Yet there was a new brightness in her eyes, a sense of triumph. She was free, at least for now. In the hush of that desert twilight, Derek gently clasped her hands. Mia hovered nearby, allowing them a moment of closeness. Suddenly, the console beeped from within the cylinder. Sanaa's gaze snapped to it. She pressed a sequence of glyphs. A hazy hologram projected, revealing star charts, swirling patterns of cosmic data. Then, through Derek's telepathic link with Sanaa, he perceived an answer, a faint return signal from somewhere beyond Earth's orbit. Perhaps a passing ship from her people, or an automated probe that recognized her beacon. Her breath caught, face alight with cautious joy. The device flickered, scanning for a stable channel, losing it, then finding it again. Finally, it locked. She closed her eyes, sending a mental greeting across that cosmic void, tears slipping down her cheeks. Derek felt echoes of relief and longing in her mind. Home was listening. Mia approached, placing a hand on Sanaa's shoulder. Does this mean they're coming for you? Sanaa nodded slowly, then with trembling telepathy, shared, yes. They may take time, but they will try to reach me. Derek's heart clenched, torn between happiness for her and the ache of losing her. But he knew she deserved the chance to decide her own destiny. If her people came to reclaim her, how could he stand in the way? Yet, had not he seen a bond forming between them, something transcending words? They traveled east under the cover of night, the cylinder's glow guiding their path. With each mile they placed between themselves and Cross, hope grew. But they knew that final confrontation loomed. Cross's obsession would not end with a single thwarted ambush. Government interests, shady private organizations, Sanaa represented a prize too valuable for them to abandon. Still, the days that followed found them encountering no immediate threats. They stashed themselves in a deserted canyon ranch, discovering an old caretaker's cabin with intact roofing. Sanaa used the cylinder's interface to refine her telepathic abilities, building a protective aura that could shield them from detection. Mia scouted local roads. Derek set up rudimentary defenses. One starry evening, as they sat around a makeshift fire, Sanaa reached out to Derek, weaving gentle illusions in the air, visions of her home planet, with its iridescent forests and twin moons, the lakes that shimmered under lavender skies. He felt her yearning and could only hold her hand. Mia pretended not to notice the tears on Derek's cheeks. The final stand came abruptly, without warning. In the darkest hour, a roar of engines and the flash of headlights lit the canyon. Black SUVs and heavily armored trucks rolled in, shining spotlights upon the cabin. Men in suits bearing high-tech weaponry poured out, fanning across the desert floor. A voice amplified through loudspeakers. By authority of the Office of Strategic Aerospace Affairs, we demand you surrender the alien. Cooperate, and we will consider leniency. Derek cursed under his breath, extinguishing the fire quickly. Mia grabbed her pistol, scanning for an escape route. Sanaa pressed her hands together, that shimmering aura flaring around her like a luminous shield. Derek recognized the man behind the voice. Argyle, Cross's associate, the same one from the carnival's hidden chamber. The government angle was no longer hidden. They had come in full force. How did they find us? Mia hissed. Derek shook his head. Perhaps a slip at some gas station, or a partial reading from the beacon. Regardless, they had no choice but to fight or flee. But this time, there were too many for illusions or telekinetic blasts to scatter. They needed a miracle. Let me speak to them, Sanaa's mind voice whispered to Derek. He frowned. They won't listen. They've come to take you, dead or alive. She squeezed his hand. We must try. Gathering her courage, Sanaa stepped into the open, the aura around her pulsing with quiet majesty. Derek and Mia followed, hands raised to show they were unarmed. A hush seemed to fall over the assembled troops. Argyle strode forward, a sneer on his lips, flanked by soldiers with rifles raised. Sanaa gazed at him, then closed her eyes. A wave of calm radiated outward, a telepathic plea. Derek felt it washing over him like a warm tide, urging peace, empathy. Some of the soldiers' faces softened, uncertain. Argyle shook his head, battling the influence, while a few men lowered their weapons in confusion. What trick is this? Argyle snarled, struggling to maintain control. You will not bend my will, alien. His finger tightened on the trigger of a strange device strapped to his wrist. A high-pitched whine cut through the air. Sanaa grimaced, staggering as though an invisible blade tore at her mind. Derek stepped forward, outraged. Stop. You'll kill her. Argyle smirked. I'll do whatever it takes. Then, from the edge of the group, another voice spoke, a measured, icy tone Derek recognized. Victor Cross, stepping into the light with his trademark cunning. Mr. Argyle, be careful. We want her subdued, not destroyed. Their eyes met, and Derek glared. Haven't you done enough, Cross? This ends now. Cross gave a curt laugh, then barked an order. Soldiers advanced. Mia fired her pistol, but it was a pitiful show against overwhelming numbers. Sanaa, weakened, tried to maintain her aura. Bullets ricocheted off the shimmering barrier, but it flickered dangerously, each shot a toll on her strength. The standstill threatened to explode into violence. Derek clenched his fists, eyeing the swirling desert dust, the ring of enemies. Was this how it would end, a hopeless final stand? Suddenly, the night sky brightened with an unearthly glow, pale at first, then intensifying into streaks of dazzling color. The entire desert fell silent, as everyone looked up. A shape descended from the heavens, wreathed in shimmering lights. It was no simple aircraft, but something sleek and otherworldly, humming with cosmic resonance. Sanaa's people had come. A hush of awe spread among the soldiers, and even Cross and Argyle stared, slack-jawed. The craft hovered above the sand, rotating gently, beams of radiant energy scanning the ground. Sanaa managed a faint smile, tears glistening on her cheeks. She extended her hands to the sky, sending out a telepathic welcome. A new wave of telepathic power blanketed the area, overwhelming Argyle's devices, shorting circuits, causing men to clutch their heads in confusion. Weapons dropped, lights flickered. From the craft, a glowing platform descended, and Derek sensed a presence within, akin to Sanaa's, but more vast, more ancient. Cross tried to raise a gun, but the presence froze him in place, his muscles locked by a silent command. Panic seized Argyle as he struggled to resist. The soldiers, outmatched by alien technology, retreated or collapsed. Derek and Mia shielded their eyes from the brightness. Sanaa stepped forward, drawn by the silent call from her kin. Derek followed, heart pounding. A faint telepathic link spanned from the ship, beckoning Sanaa. She turned to Derek, anxiety flickering across her features. I can go home now, yet I feel torn. She closed her eyes, projecting a powerful message: no more harm. Let us leave in peace. It washed over friend and foe alike. Derek watched as Cross's face contorted with rage, but he couldn't move or speak. Argyle knelt, forced into submission. At last, the barrier around the craft parted, revealing a small entryway. With hesitant steps, Sanaa guided Derek onto the platform, Mia close behind. Inside the craft's luminous hold, the air felt fresh, the walls humming with otherworldly energy. Sanaa sagged, relief and weariness mingling in her posture. A new figure approached, tall and graceful, with skin a lighter shade of violet, hair drifting as if gravity had no claim. They radiated quiet authority, and Derek sensed their gratitude. Sanaa embraced the newcomer, tears flowing. Mental voices conversed in a cascade of swirling images. She looked back at Derek, who stared in awe, uncertain if this moment spelled goodbye. But the newcomer smiled warmly, placing a hand upon Derek's shoulder and then upon Mia's. A wave of welcoming acceptance washed over them. You saved her. You are welcome here. The thought was crystal clear, resonating across language barriers. From the ship's open hatch, Derek glimpsed Cross and Argyle staring in impotent fury, their forces scattered or subdued. A gentle hum rose, and the craft ascended, lifting them above the desert. Derek clutched Mia's arm, heart racing. They were leaving Earth, if only for a moment, under the protection of Sanaa's people. They hovered, rising high enough to see the curvature of the horizon. The craft paused. Sanaa turned to Derek, eyes shining. We can show you wonders, or return you home safely. The choice is yours. Her affection, her bond with him, was tangible in that mind-to-mind contact. Mia, trembling with excitement, swallowed hard. Derek, after everything, you think we should see this through? He looked into Sanaa's luminous eyes. The memory of dusty roads, hidden barns, carnival cruelty, all of it weighed on him. But also, the memory of hope, of love blossoming against all odds. Smiling, he nodded. I want to see where you come from, Sanaa. If your people allow it. Mia, are you with me? Mia exhaled a shaky laugh. I'd be a fool to say no. Sanaa's companion inclined their head, guiding them deeper into the craft. The hatch sealed, and Derek felt a gentle shift of gravity as the vessel surged into the sky, speeding away from the site of conflict. Through a viewport, they watched Earth's surface recede, clouds swirling, the carnival's garish lights an irrelevant speck below. In that silent voyage among the stars, Derek took Sanaa's hand. Their journey had been fraught with fear and peril, but here, in the comforting hum of advanced alien technology, they found a glimmer of peace. Sanaa's mind brushed his, full of gratitude and affection, and he knew that his life had changed irrevocably the day he first saw that carnival poster. Weeks would pass before they returned to Earth, if they returned at all. In that time, Derek and Mia would witness a tapestry of cosmic wonders, guided by Sanaa's kin. Old wounds would heal in the starlight of distant constellations. And when at last they set foot on home soil again, it would be on their terms, no longer fugitives, but emissaries of friendship between worlds. As for Victor Cross and his conspirators, they found themselves disgraced, their carnival shut down, evidence of their cruelty laid bare by countless eyewitness accounts. Authorities, both terrestrial and interstellar, delivered a reckoning. The Celestial Carnival, once so proud, became a relic of an era that would not soon be repeated. Sanaa stood triumphant at Derek's side. No cage around her, but the shining possibility of a life freely chosen. Their bond, forged by adversity, blossomed into a love that spanned the gulf between species and soared among the stars. And as they gazed at the endless horizon of future days, they knew that hope, like love, could never truly be caged. At the story's end, in a quiet moment beneath a sky of dancing auroras, Derek and Sanaa exchanged smiles. Mia, ever the stalwart friend, looked on with satisfaction. The universe stretched out before them, vast and uncharted, but they would meet its wonders together. They had risked everything for Sanaa's freedom, and in doing so, unlocked not only the door of a cruel cage, but the door to their own hearts, finding that love could indeed transcend galaxies and heal old wounds. Under the watchful glow of distant stars, Derek, Sanaa, and Mia stood hand in hand, free from the shadows of captivity or pursuit. Their story, once fraught with danger, had arrived at a peaceful horizon, illuminated by the promise of new beginnings and boundless adventure ahead.